So friends, we have the corporate warrior, Mr. Gurcharan Das, an exponent, well-versed on Gita and Mahabharata and writer of many books, ex-chief of PNG. Now we continue our journey on the learning path led by Mr. Gurcharan Das. Mr. Gurcharan Das, please. Sir. Mr. Gurcharan Das through audiovisuals, please.
Thank you. You do me honor. And certainly it's a wonderful thing to follow such an inspiring speech on Kargil. But I am going to take you from Kargil to Hastinapur today. As I was walking up to the platform, somebody called me a management guru, and I didn't have time to tell him that my idea of a management guru is somebody who is good at understanding, GU, but relatively useless, RU. Of course, the name guru is also in my name. But it wasn't always so. Until the age of 3, my name was Ashok Kumar. But my grandmother suspected that my mother had given me that name because she thought my mother was secretly in love with the Bollywood actor Ashok Kumar. So my grandmother took me to her guru and placed me at his feet and asked the guru to give this boy a name. And the guru smiled at me down below and he said, let's call him Gurcharan Das. So overnight I was transformed from the Prince of Happiness, Ashok Kumar, to the humble servant of the feet of the guru. But the guru, I think, had meant to give me a message. And the message was very clear. It was the message of humility. Humble servant of the feet of the guru. And you know, in my long career in business, I have met many CEOs and many managers. But the best CEOs had two qualities. One was determination, fierce determination, willpower, almost stubbornness. But the second was not intelligence, mind you. Intelligence is an overrated virtue, and far too many people recruit people only on that basis. No, the second virtue was humility. Now, humility does not mean that the person is not ambitious. Oh, the best CEOs are enormously ambitious, but their ambition is for their company and not necessarily for their personal reward. And you can see this humility in their ability to listen. Listening skills, which are very important in a leader. You can see it in teamwork. General Malik talked about teamwork. That's where you actually see humility. Now, we've had a Prime Minister who we all admire because of his qualities of humility. However, we wish to achieve this tremendous achievement with one hand tied behind our back. Now, what do I mean with one hand tied behind our back? I mean that most economies in Asia, especially China today, have risen on the back of an amazing state policy of the government, of the tremendous infrastructure contributions of the government. But in India, we seem to have achieved this despite the government. And that is why I often say that our economy grows at night when the government is asleep. The disturbing thing today for me is that prosperity is spreading in India, but happiness is not, because of the terrible state of governance. Now, when I talk about governance failure, I do not mean the politician who is caught with a bribe in his pocket. I mean the day-to-day interaction that all of us have with the state, no matter who we are. You take 1 out of 4 school teachers in a government primary school does not go to work, is absent. And 1 out of 4 who is present is not teaching. 2 out of 5 doctors in a government primary health center are absent. 1 out of 3 nurses in a primary health center is absent. 69% of the medicines in a primary health center are stolen. Every Indian, once in his or her lifetime, has to change the name of his property when your father dies. Almost nobody can achieve this without paying a bribe to a patwari or a talati or a revenue official. Delhi has more water available per capita than almost any city in the world, 300 liters per person per day. Paris has 155 in comparison. London has 169. Yet London and Paris give their citizens water for 24 hours a day. Delhi gives water to its citizens on the average 4 hours a day. And I could go on. 25% of the earnings of a rickshawala in Kanpur are taken away by the police. I suddenly realized that I have to renew my driver's license. My only thought, my nagging thought is, Will I have to pay a bribe when I go to get the driver's license renewed? Well, you know what I'm talking about. All this diminishes us, and that is why I say today that more than economic reforms, we need reform of the state. We need administrative reforms, judicial reforms, police reforms, political reforms. We need administrative reforms so that school teachers will show up in school. If you sacked one school teacher, they will all come. We need accountability. We need political reforms so that 1 out of 5 members in the last parliament had a criminal record. This was at the same time that the Chinese Politburo, 80% were technocrats. Anyway, pretty depressing. Pretty depressing, particularly after that wonderful message of Kargil that we have just heard. So I felt that the moral failure was so eating into our fabric of our society that I felt a need for some kind of answer. And so I turned to the Mahabharata. Now, why the Mahabharata? Mahabharata is unique in engaging with the world of politics. Number 2, it's obsessed with dharma. Number 3, no one in the Mahabharata looks to God for an answer to dharma. They are left into their own devices, which means that their moral reasoning skills improve, because acting morally with dharma is part of understanding what is right and what is wrong in a situation. So my new book, which I've just completed, called The Difficulty of Being Good on the Subtle Art of Dharma, is about the central problem of how to live our lives. It is one man's search for dharma, and dharma as construed both as a private virtue as well as civic virtue. The Mahabharata makes you look in the mirror, and it makes you realize how you deceive yourself thinking you're good when you're not. And I hope it will motivate some of those absentee school teachers also to look in the mirror. Let me give you an idea of what I'm doing in this book, and also relate it to the subject of leadership. My first chapter is called Duryodhan's Envy. Now, most of you will know that the Mahabharata is a story of 2 sets of cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, who have a rivalry for the throne. And Dhritarashtra divides the kingdom and gives the worst half to the Pandavas. But the Pandavas work hard, they win battles, they make alliances and become powerful. And at the Rajsuya sacrifice of Yudhishthira, Duryodhan suddenly gets very envious to see how well his cousins are doing. And he says, Shakuni says to him, "What's the problem with you, king? Why have you grown pale? And you look very depressed." Duryodhan answers, and these are the words from the Mahabharata, actual words. Duryodhan says, "What man of mettle will stand to see his rivals prosper and himself decline. Now in those words, he has actually captured a very dangerous part of envy, which says that if my neighbor is doing well, that automatically means that I have gone down in the world. You know, this is the basic idea. They did a survey at the Harvard Business School a few years ago, and they asked these young managers, would you like to earn $100,000 a year or $50,000 a year? 88% said we'll earn $50,000 a year. Why? Because if the question was that if you were earning $100,000, your friends would be earning $200,000. That was part of the deal. But if you were earning $50,000, your friends would be earning $25,000. So they made the irrational decision to earn half of what they should have been earning. And what Duryodhan has pointed out is a very dangerous thing about envy. See, unlike jealousy you can forgive, because in jealousy, somebody may run away with your wife, so you can feel jealous of your wife. But with envy, it's your neighbor who's doing well, who has diminished you. You know, when I was 5 years old, in our neighbor's house, there was a young boy about the same age. He had a red fire engine. I hated that boy because he had that red fire engine. And one day he was not looking, I broke that engine. You see how dangerous it is, how destructive. And you know, when I was working in Bombay, we had a union leader. Next to our factory was the Philips factory, and it had been on strike for 12 months. And the union, we were very worried. This was at Datta Samant's time. And the union leader said, I don't care if you ever open that factory, as long as the Dutch factory manager goes to hell. Very dangerous. You know, the Greeks had a good solution to envy, and that was that if somebody became too successful, too popular in society, they would exile him for 10 years. Like a famous general, General Malik, I'm afraid, would have been exiled in Athens for 10 years, until the envy in the society cooled down. I must tell you, as a shareholder of Reliance, I am very worried about Anil Ambani's envy for Mukesh. Anil wants the world to think that he is just as competent as his brother. And he probably is. But the world does not think so. But the destructive quality now is that I'm afraid Anil is not so much concerned about how well his enterprises do as how badly he can destroy Mukesh's enterprise. And I tell you, 4 million shareholders of Reliance are also worried about that. So this gives you a little taste of what, this is one chapter. There are 10 chapters in the book. Obviously, there isn't the time to talk about those. And since we are running out of time, I was just thinking, because I was going to take you through 3 or 4 such chapters, and maybe what I'll do is, in the interest of time, skip a little bit. You all know that there is a game of dice. Shakuni's solution to Duryodhan's envy is to rig a game of dice. Shakuni is not only the best dice player in the world, but he's also the biggest cheat, the most cheating dice player in the world. Yudhishthira loses his kingdom, and the Pandavas go into exile as a part of the contract, part of an agreement to Yudhishthira that the Pandavas give. When they are in exile in the Dvaita forest, Draupadi sees her husband. He's sleeping on the hard earth, and she says, "Great king, I weep for you because you slept on sheets of silk and pillows of goose down, and look at you sleeping on the hard earth." And she says, Draupadi is a good manager, so she has a bias for action. So she says, let's collect an army and let's go and win back our kingdom, which was stolen from us in a rigged game of dice. And she says, it is your dharma as an kshatriya to wage a just war. Yudhishthira says, no, my great queen, my dharma is the fact that I have given my word to Dhritarashtra. And my word is that we have to spend the next 13 years in exile. Now you notice there are two meanings of dharma that they're both discussing this. Draupadi has talked about the dharma of the kshatriya, and Yudhishthira has talked about much more a dharma of his conscience, word that he has given a promise. And so you have in the Mahabharata a fascinating discussion, a kind of clash of dharmas. And this shows you that actually the epic as it evolved incorporated new ideas. Yudhishthira's dharma has come much more from the Buddhist tradition. And one of the things I speculate in my book is, what if Arjuna's charioteer, Sutta, had been Buddha rather than Krishna? The Mahabharata would have gone in a different direction, right? Anyway, so as they're discussing this question of dharma, one of the issues here becomes means versus ends. Because Draupadi says that we have a good end in view. You are a great, honorable king. And his view is that no, but we can't adopt the wrong means to the end. And there's a very interesting point that Vidura makes. You know Vidur Niti? Well, Vidura says that, look, you can sacrifice a person for the sake of a village. And you can sacrifice a village for the sake of a nation. Which means, dharma means that the greatest good for the greatest number is the achieving of dharma. While I was writing this chapter, I read an account in the Times of India, and you may have remembered it too, that there was a child who was drowning on a beach in Goa. And this boy, who came with a party of friends from Delhi, jumped in and saved this boy. Now the reporter of the Times of India asked this boy, "You are a hero," she said. "Tell us why you did it." And he looked very sheepishly and he said, "You know, actually I was trying to impress one of the girls in our group." And the reporter said, "But then you're not a hero." But you see, Vidur would have said, "But the child was saved. So the moral deed was done. So what difference does it make what his motivation was?" Now you see, this is where Yudhishthira would disagree. Yudhishthira would say, Yudhishthira would have jumped in even if no one was looking to save the child. So these are examples of moral dilemmas, and why Mahabharata teaches you, why Mahabharata improves your moral skills. And that's very important for CEOs who daily face moral dilemmas in their work and their life. Anyway, you know, let me skip a little bit and go to when Yudhishthira comes back from exile and he wants his kingdom now back, Indraprastha, which Duryodhan has taken. But Duryodhan refuses. They have these long peace negotiations, and the peace negotiations fail. And finally Yudhishthira has to declare war. Now this is the same Yudhishthira who refused Draupadi to collect an army and go and get the kingdom. Now Yudhishthira has changed. The dharma of the leader, what the Mahabharata is telling you, is not Yudhishthira's dharma or the earlier Yudhishthira's dharma, but a much more pragmatic dharma. And the notion of this pragmatic dharma is what I call reciprocal altruism. Reciprocal altruism is basically, you see it as essentially as presenting a happy face to the world, but if you are slapped on this happy face, then you have to slap the other person back, which is tit for tat. It's not immoral, because your first move is a happy move. You do the first good deed. But if the good deed is not reciprocated, then you have to act in a different way. Anyway, I could go on, and there isn't the time. Let me just quickly close by saying that the Mahabharata, at a great moment in the Gita. The Gita was inserted later into the epic, by the way. It was the Vaishnava influence that began in the 1st century BC. And Bhishma is dead. On the 10th day that the Gita is inserted, when Sanjay says Bhishma is dead. And he presses a reverse button, and we are back at the beginning of the war, and Arjun looking at the troops in that famous scene that everybody knows, and General Malik referred to it a few minutes ago, says, "I don't want to fight." Now, I think generals cannot say that, but political leaders can say that. And why Arjuna is a good model for our political leaders is because he at least puts the moral dimension into the equation. Imagine just before the Iraq war, George Bush is having a meeting with his cabinet. You have Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, all of them. They're discussing the economic consequences of going into Iraq, the political consequences, oil, etc., Israel. Nobody says, we're going to this war and we're going to kill people tomorrow, and many of these people we're going to kill will be our own people. And why Arjuna is admirable, in my view, is that we want our political leaders to put the moral dimension also in the equation. Anyway, one of the reasons that Krishna uses to persuade Arjuna is the famous thing about Nishkam Karma, that act for the sake of the action and not for your personal reward. Something that Harry Truman expressed to the people of America, that when you don't care who gets the credit, your work will be good. The same idea. And this is also the idea, essentially, where if you can can forget yourself, can diminish your ego, then maybe you will actually perform better. And this notion of self-forgetting is what General Malik also talked about, focus. And do you remember that famous scene in the Mahabharata where Drona asks Arjun, what do you see, when he's aiming at the bird? And he says, do you see the tree? Arjun says, no. Do you see the branch? No. Do you see the bird? No. Do you see the eye of the bird? Yes. So that's the kind of focus which results in self-forgetting. And you know, when Tendulkar scored this wonderful century a few days ago, what a heartbreaking moment for us all. He must have forgotten himself to have performed. And this is what athletes call being in the zone. Of course, all of us sometimes do forget ourselves. We sometimes say, oh my God, it's 6 o'clock. I thought it was only 4 o'clock. Because we were absorbed in doing what we were doing. And every CEO in every company would love to see his employees behave in this highly motivated, focused way. Instead of asking every day, when am I going to get my next promotion? Why is my office smaller than my neighbors? And all that negative energy that we bring to our work. So this idea of Nishkam Karma is what I have reflected on in chapter 5 of this book. And I've asked the question, can ordinary human beings behave this way? And frankly, I am skeptical. I think it's a very nice ideal. I think it's like Marx's ideal of equality. But ordinary people, I don't think the ego can shrink that far. And this is why communism collapsed, because the human ego just could not shrink as far as Marx would have liked. And so, you know, but there is an important lesson that we need these ideals. And what one can learn from this is to hire people for attitude. When you are hiring an employee, look for the attitude, because Nishkam Karma is also an attitude. Finally, attitude to work. Some people just have a right, positive attitude. You can always give them skills. We do the opposite. We always hire people for skills and we forget about their attitude and we get into trouble. Anyway, let me close now and let me just say to you that the Mahabharata is a dark tale. So dark, in this war everybody dies. And at the end, Yudhishthira has to rule over an empty kingdom for 35 years. But this, in fact, I believe they had to write the Ramayana to give people some hope. The Ramayana at least has a perfect hero, a perfect brother of a hero, perfect wife of a hero, a perfect villain also. But the Mahabharata, I do believe, despite this dark tale, snatches victory. And snatches victory in a moment like this one. Do you remember at the end, Yudhishthira is walking towards heaven? A stray dog attaches himself to Yudhishthira. And they arrive at heaven, at the gates of heaven. And Indra comes out. Indra is the heaven keeper, the king of heaven. And Indra says to Yudhishthira, great king, welcome. But Yudhishthira says, what about this dog? And Indra says, sorry, dog's not allowed in heaven. And then Yudhishthira says, but if a person comes to you for refuge, you do not refuse them. You help them. This is dharma. So how can I go to heaven without this dog? Now, nobody in this room would have behaved like this. I can bet you. But every child in every culture will learn compassion from this story. Now, what is Mahabharata telling us about leadership? What it's saying is that finally an act of goodness is one of the very few things of worth, of genuine worth in this world. We may all be in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And so, some of the lessons on leadership, I would say, are the idea of attitude. You hire people for attitude, train them on skills. The idea of reciprocal altruism. A good leader has to punish, and that's why there's a whole section on Dandaniti in the Mahabharata. You need determination, you need humility, and finally you need the balance of dharma. That balance which Ramalingam Raju crossed in the Satyam scandal. We should have ambition, but not cross the balance of dharma. Thank you.
So we have had an excellent session and a lot of learnings from Gita and Mahabharata from both the learned speakers. And I will again quote from the Gita when Arjun says that Bhuya Kata Tapti Shanuto Nasti Me Amritam, that please continue preaching as I am not yet satisfied. So those who are still seeking to learn more through the question answer session. So we are short of time, so 2 or 3 questions. Questions from the audience?
Yeah, hello. They're here.
Yeah, please speak.
My name is Sunil Alakhandi. I am from Force Motors. My question is for both from Kargil to Kurukshetra is there whether any role is there for humor in management or in war?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? What's the role for human beings?
No, my question is that from Kargil to
Kurukshetra.
From Kurukshetra to Kargil, is there any role of humor in management or war?
Humor.
Yeah.
Laughter.
No, it's humor only.
Of course, there's a tremendous role for humor. It is a very important way to connect with the other person. What Yudhishthira finally shows you in the Mahabharata is that he can put himself in the shoes of another human being. Now, Yudhishthira lacks humor, but what he does is show you tremendous empathy. And empathy is where the moral begins. And ultimately, good leaders know that they have to get things done through their people. And they empathize with the people, with the needs of the people. And that's where one of the ways is humor.
I totally agree with him. And let me tell you that humor is essential to bring about the balance in your interaction with people, in your behavior with other people. So you can't afford to lose all the humor, whether it is war or peace. Humor is necessary to retain a balance in your outlook and in your behavior.
Mr. Das?
Yes.
I have a question for you here, sir. A little to your right, yeah.
Oh yes, I
Here.
can see
Hi.
you.
I was very curious to understand what is your interpretation of this character in Mahabharata called Draupadi. Is she a person who fires up people? Is she, if you had to put her in perspective for me in an organization, what do you think was her role?
Very good question. And I would say, frankly, Draupadi has become a feminist heroine today. And she has been, in fact, all the women of the Mahabharata are strong women. Satyavati, Kunti, Draupadi, these are feisty women who keep the dynasty going. The men are comparatively weaker. And I also say that the most dramatic moment for Draupadi was when she was brought before the Sabha, the Kshatriya kings, after the game of dice, which the Kauravas had won, and Yudhishthira had lost, and so he had lost his whole family as well as his kingdom. And she's dragged by her hair by Dushasan. And she keeps her mind, her cool, and she asks the assembly, did my husband lose me first or lose himself first? Which means that if he lost himself first, then he was no longer competent to gamble her. And immediately Duryodhan realizes that she has got away and changed the whole situation. So Draupadi, there's a tremendous legal discussion after that. Dharma also means law. And there's a legal discussion about whether a person who's lost himself, become a slave, can he actually own a woman and not? And Bhishma, of course, keeps quiet. Everybody looks to Bhishma. And Bhishma discusses like a lawyer, on the one hand this, on the one hand that. Instead, Bhishma should have gone and thrashed Dushasan. Right? Now the Mahabharata gets very angry that Bhishma is silent. So what does it say? The Mahabharata says that half the blame of a wicked deed falls on the person, the perpetrator, the criminal. 1/4 of the blame goes to the ally, the person who is the co-conspirator. But 1/4 of the blame goes to the person who remains silent. So silence is something in our companies. All of the CEOs, etc., should encourage an atmosphere where people can blow the whistle when they see a wrongdoing. And that's why this whistleblower bill is so important. And I can say very quickly that when I was working on this chapter, the successor to Abdul Kalam, our president, was nominated, and this was Pratibha Patil. Now, newspapers for a whole month had been full of news of her moral failures. And just before the election, I wrote a column, my Sunday column, in the Times of India, and I appealed to Manmohan Singh. I said, you're a good man, you are a Bhishma in this, a selfless man in the Congress party. Now you should speak up, because we are going to replace the most popular president in Indian history, Abdul Kalam, by somebody with moral failings. And if you don't let it happen, then the whole country, all of us, will be diminished as Indians. So this was the lesson about silence.
Thank you.